Hello and welcome to what series is this? Voices of the Prophets, class number. I don't remember. We are in the book of Ovadyah, and we have in the studio Clifford Cohen, Colin Martin, um, Abigail Foster in the YouTube comments that she'll have to watch later because she's looking after the grandkids. Well, that is the right thing to do. That is the right choice. Lisa is here in the YouTube comments. Let me put the studio link in the YouTube um, chat in case people want to join. From there, it says we have 3 people watching on YouTube. I want to once again announce this week's class sponsorship by JD Dryer, um, Joel Dryer, rather, I should say, uh, in honor of his son JD's birthday. We announced that also in the Genesis class, but I wanted to, if I had done 2 classes last week, we would have dedicated the week's classes to it. So we're just 2 classes a week now, thank God. So I just wanted to include a second class for that dedication. And other ways you can support the channel: become a channel member. You get perks like early access to channel content. This live stream will become members only for 1 week following the stream, and my YouTube shorts, which I publish from time to time, are available 1 day early for channel members. It also helps the channel if you'd like to support the channel in a more substantial way. There are links in the comments for donations. You can also shop at artscroll.com/Rebbe Rafi, REBBI RAFI. Make a purchase of an item that you find you'll enjoy, and I'll earn a commission from the sale. In addition, this class is brought to you by the Seattle Kollel. Visit their website, seattlekollel.com, SeattleKollel.com. Consider making a tax-deductible donation to the Seattle Kollel to support Jewish learning and programming for Jewish families and the Jewish community in Seattle, Washington. Okay, and with no further ado, we can go ahead and start the class. Of course, everyone's invited to ask questions, contribute comments at any point. Before we go ahead and start, anyone have any questions or comments? In the YouTube live stream, feel free to put your comments in the chat and I'll peek from time to time and attempt to respond. Okay, so here is a slide. Let's get my laser pointer, shall we? And let's figure out what was the context of this slide. So we were talking about Jeremiah. Okay. We were talking about Jeremiah a little bit. Okay. Last verse we did was Ovadyah verse 16. For as you drank upon my holy mountain, all the nations shall drink continually, and they shall drink, and they shall be confounded, and they shall be as though they were not. And we talked about who is the one who's being addressed over here as you drank upon my holy mountain. Is it the nations saying, as you drank in celebration of my holy mountain when you destroyed the temple, so you'll drink? We offered the idea that, a little drinking brings you joy, but too much drinking brings you poison and sickness and destruction. So you'll continue to drink until you'll be destroyed. As you drank in celebration over the destruction of the Jewish people, you'll continue to drink, so to speak, until you be destroyed. That was one interpretation. Another interpretation is, as you drank in a celebratory manner, you'll drink a cup of wrath. And we saw the verse in Jeremiah about the cup of wrath. We related it to that, and the cup of wrath will destroy you. But it says, or it's talking about the Jewish people, as you drank a cup of wrath at that time, all the nations shall drink a cup of wrath in later times when they meet their comeuppance. And we, so this is some of the notes on that. We addressed Jeremiah chapter 25 and chapter 49, which we have over here. Jeremiah chapter 25. For thus said Hashem, God of Israel, to me, take this cup of wine of wrath from my hand and give it to drink to all the nations to whom I send you. Jeremiah is commanded to give the cup of wrath to the nations for their destruction of the Jewish people. And they will drink and reel to and fro and be like madmen because of the sword that I send between them. So, and then I invited you to look over there where you find that he lists basically every single nation you could think of, including Edom. That's, what we would call Rome today, including the Arabian nations and every other nation you could think of that's mentioned in the Bible. It's mentioned over there as drinking this cup, and that parallels here where it says all the nations will drink the cup of wrath, if you want to read it that way. Okay. We talked about the sword of one nation, it says, will be against the other, and of a man against his fellow. We talked last time about nation against nation, and also within nations, the infighting of one person to the other within the nation. That will be the destruction of the nations, and we'll see that more. Okay, now Jeremiah 49 we didn't actually get into, but I did invite you to look at it because what I mentioned is it's parallel to Ovadyah in many almost identical verses and prophecies, but included in there is this reference to the drinking. So we'll just quickly review that. We didn't do it last time, but I wanted to, so we'll quickly relate it. Okay, the verse says like this: Kicho Amar Adonai, Hine Asher Ein Mishpatam Lishtos Hakos Shaso Yishtu Ve'atahu Nako Tinoke Lo Sinoke Kishaso Tishte. Okay, so we have the translation here. For thus said Hashem, behold, those whose judgment is not to drink the cup shall surely drink. Okay, meaning over there also it's talking about the downfall of Edom, and in emphasizing the degree to which Edom is guilty and deserving of the punishment which will come upon him, it says that even those nations whose judgment is not to drink the cup of wrath, as it were mentioned in Jeremiah 25, shall drink it. Now that's not to say that if their judgment is not to drink it, so why would they drink it? But the idea is, I'm really just summing up a big idea in a short amount of time, so bear with me, is that the nations that are less guilty than you, the nations who have less of a judgment to drink the cup of wrath, they shall still drink. There still is guilt, even though they are not as guilty as you, Edom. And you are he. Okay, meaning Ve'atahu, and you are he, meaning you are the most guilty one of all. So then it says, Nakoti nakeh, will you be naki? Will you be clean? Will you be innocent? Should you be deemed innocent? Really? Can you claim innocence any more than any other nations that will drink the cup of wrath? It says, Loti nakeh, you shall not be deemed innocent. Ki shato tishteh, you shall surely drink. So there's kind of what we call in Hebrew kal vachomer, that it's like an all the more so type of a setup, that if these nations that bear less guilt than you will drink the cup of wrath, and you're the most guilty of all because you're the one who committed the crime more than anyone else. You were the leader. You were the fomenter. You were the instigator. So how could you be innocent where they are guilty? So your guilt will be the greatest of all, it says over there. And okay, so now there's a link over here. I actually think it's worthwhile to look at the chapter for other reasons. Meaning when I mentioned to you the parallels between Ovadyah and this section of Jeremiah. So it says Edom, to Edom, right? Here's a prophecy regarding Edom. What does it say? It says, thus said Hashem of hosts, He says, "Ha'ein od chachma b'Teman." Is there no more wisdom in Teman? Remember, we saw the verses in Ovadyah regarding that the Edomites would be bereft deprived of wisdom, and they would make colossal mistakes that would bring about their downfall. Avda eitzami banim. The counsel will go lost from their sons, from the people of their nation. Nisracha chochmatam. Their wisdom will like be rotten. It will become totally spoiled, rotten, ruined. Um, da 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 da. And now look at this in verse 9. Im botzirim baulach. If grape gatherers would come to you, lo yashiru olelot, would they not leave behind small bundles? Like we had the same verse in Ovadyah regarding how if marauders would come and take everything, thieves at night, right? They would leave something, but you're going to be totally emptied out of everything, right? Im ganavim balayla. If thieves at night, hishchitu dayam, they'll only destroy dayam. Dayam means what is enough for them. They're just going to take their fill, but they're not going to destroy everything, and yet you will be totally destroyed. This verse here, I've revealed Esau. I've revealed his hidden places. He will not be able to hide. His seed shall be ransacked, and his brothers and his neighbors, and they shall be no more. That's parallel to what we saw in Ovadyah, that even the hidden places of Edom would be searched through. And then comes these verses in 12, and verse 12 is about the drinking, which we just read. And here again, it talks about the destruction. And look at this in verse 14. Shemua shamati me'et Hashem. I heard a tiding from God, from Hashem. Vitzir bagoyim shaluach, and an emissary has been sent to the nations. Hitkabetsu, gather together, uvo alaha, and come upon her. The nations are gathering against Edom. V'kum milchama, and get up for war. Although some interpret that this is the Edom gathering his forces and his allied nations to go against the Holy Land. Okay, but we dealt with that back in verse number 1. And then look at this in verse 15 here. Behold, I made you small among the nations. Bazui ba'adam. That means like derided among man. Which we had in verse 2 of Ovadyah. And here it says, Tiflatztecha hishioto zedon libecha. Here again, you have the zedon libecha, the wickedness of your heart has misled you. Shochini bechag vehasela, those who dwell in the cleft of the rock. Everybody remembers the cleft of the rock. Tofesei merom giva, those who grab onto a high, elevated hill. Ki tagbia kanesha kinecha, if you will raise your nest up like an eagle. Mishama ridech ne'um Hashem, from there I shall bring you down, said God. Okay, and then here more about Edom's destruction, like Sodom and Gomorrah, it says. Okay, we'll leave it there. But I did want to just show you, and there's more that goes on about the destruction of Esau. This is actually amazing in verse 20. I'm going a bit far afield, but I want to throw it out there. Maybe we hinted to this a little bit before. And it's really not fair of me to mention it so quickly and not follow up on it, but we'll have to come back to it. I can't resist a little bit. It's too juicy. It says in verse 20, therefore, hear the counsel of Hashem that he has advised regarding Edom, and his thoughts that he thought about the inhabitants of Teman. Remember, Teman literally means Yemen today, but we explained that Teman was a reference to Edom as well. Im lo yischavum tzeirei hatzon. If the young ones of the sheep, the tzeirei hatzon, will not yischavum means to like wipe them away. Okay. Im lo yashima alehem nevehem, if they will not destroy their dwelling places. Who are the young ones of the sheep that are going to wipe away Edom? Here, there's a frightening passage in the Talmud that says that the young ones of the sheep that are going to wipe away Edom, believe it or not, it says is Persia. Persia. Now, Persia, for those who don't know, is Iran. Now, how relevant is that today when we have the temperature rising precipitously between the Western nations and Iran with its axis of evil, as it were, and they've used now the terminology of the octopus. The head of the octopus is Iran, and it has its tentacles throughout the Middle East with all of its proxies, and it's Iran that's at the head, if you will, of the coalition of hostile Islamic nations that are coming into serious political conflict with the Western Christian nations. And this is something that has been somewhat foretold, although it seems from this that in the conflict, Iran is predicted to be the winner, which is very scary. Now, the Abarbanel has some very interesting comments on this that would take us so far afield that I don't want to explore it now, but I do want to come back to it. Okay. And maybe if it becomes more relevant in the news, I'll reveal what he says about this. Okay, fine. We'll leave it. We'll leave it there. Okay. That's just Jeremiah 49 and how parallel it is to Ovadyah. It's really quite astounding. Okay, let's get back to our slides. Any questions on what I said until now? Oh, Bree is in the studio. Hello, Bree. Welcome.
Shalom, shalom, Rabbi
Shalom.
Rafi. This was reminding me of Queen Esther because she has this first merit because she's an orphan, that she's the only one that can conquer Haman, which comes from Esau.
Okay, I'm glad you. Ooh, I hit my mic. I'm glad you brought it up. So it's interesting. You mentioned that she was an orphan. I'm not sure the relevance of that. However, we're gonna see in verse 18 if we get there tonight. We may or
Because
we
she
may
had
not.
the highest, because she didn't have the parents, that she had higher, like nothing to disrupt, no sinning of her parents. That's how it's explained that she had the first, the merit to overtake Haman.
Okay, that's interesting. I wasn't familiar with that. I will make this comment though that that Esther and Mordecai and the story of Purim, which takes place in Persia. It's very interesting that it takes place in Persia, and their chief adversary is Haman, as you said, who is from the seed of Esau. He's specifically from the nation of Amalek, which was a grandson of Esau, and it was specifically she and Mordecai who were able to overcome him, because our sages say, interestingly enough, that the seed of Esau will only fall to the seed of Rachel. And that's a very deep topic that I spoke a lot about this in Tanakh Talk. If you can find my class on Parshat Vayetze, if you can find my class on the Parsha of Vayetze on Tanakh Talk, Tenak, Tanakh Talk, TALK channel. It's also on my channel on the playlists tab. If you go to playlists, there's a playlist for like Torah Talk Weekly Parsha, and it has all my Parsha classes there that I did on Tanakh Talk on a playlist. Find the one on Vayetze. I talk a lot. I talk the whole hour on the connection between Rachel and Esau and Joseph, the son of Rachel, and him being the specific adversary of Esau, and why that is. It's a little too deep for this hour. But our sages do talk about it, especially in reference to the next verse, verse 18. So we'll talk about the connection between Esther. Again, Esther was from the tribe of Benjamin. Mordecai was from the tribe of Benjamin. That's why King Saul also was the first king of Israel from the tribe of Benjamin, who is commanded to wipe out Amalek, again from the tribe of, or from the nation of Esau, because he was from the seed of Rachel. And it's specifically Rachel's seed that is able to overcome Esau for reasons that I clarify in that class on Tanakh Talk, Parshat Vayetze. Go check it out. And so in verse 18, just to give it away, we're going to hear about the house of Joseph. Okay, the house of Joseph is going to pop into the text in verse 18, and the sages make the comments that they make about the seed of Rachel being the key to destroying Esau and Edom. But we'll talk maybe more about that when we get there. Okay, I just want to check the YouTube stream for comments. Will and Indy is here. Motorhead 1 is here. He says, Edom Rome or Esau Rome. What's the difference? Edom is the nation that derives from Esau, and both are associated with Rome because it's the same thing. Yeah. Comment?
May I make a comment?
Please.
I can't remember. I want to say it's in Hosea that it talks about Esau being the house of straw.
That's
And-
verse 18 of Ovadyah.
Yeah. Okay, and you're getting to that then.
We may get to it tonight. We may or we may not.
It's
We
one
haven't
of
even
my
started verse
favorite.
17, so I'm not too hopeful. But we'll see how it goes. Okay, B'nai Noach Hearts for Hashem is here. Sandy Bassi is here. Golden Gun says, I thought there are few sources who argue about who wins between Yishmael and Edom at the end. That may be true. However, I'm telling you what the Talmud says regarding that verse that I showed you about the young ones of the sheep that will wipe away Edom is, they say Persia, it says in the Talmud. Okay, I'm just putting that out there. There may be conflicting sources, but that's one source.
Also, didn't Ishmael, we know, had already made tshuva?
Well, in the end, so they
No,
say
but
that,
he did, excuse me, because of the Akedah, he goes up with Avraham, and he also, when Yitzchak goes to bury him, he gives him the honor and says, go first. So we know he made tshuva then, and he will again at the end.
right. So because we see at the end of Abraham's life, when Isaac and Ishmael reunite to bury their father, that there will be a kind of unification between the Jewish people and Ishmael, the Ishmaelites, as it were, in the end, when they will likewise return to the right path, God willing. Okay. Motorhead once says Persia, Iran was a good place until 1979 Shah debacle by Carter, America. True, and I think this goes toward what Bree said, that I think I don't want to go. I'm being tempted to go over to the Abarbanel right now, but again, I think if we would look at Persia a
Go for
century
it.
ago, if we would look at Persia a century ago, or even less than a century ago, like you're saying, back before 1979, you would say, "What is this? This is a nothing burger. How could there be prophecies, end time prophecies about Persia being the arch nemesis in the end times? It's a nothing burger of a place." But things change rapidly in the world, and so okay, I'll talk about the Barbanel a little bit. We're gonna see that later on. The verses are going to mention a place called Sfarad, which Jewish people know as Spain. It's going to mention a place called Tzorfat, which Jewish people will know as France. Both these places are mentioned in the book of Ovadyah, and the question is, what is that a reference to? And Abarbanel, in his commentary, when he talks about these passages, he says it's very difficult to reconcile these prophecies about the messianic times with our present time. Doesn't seem to fit, like basically what we knew about Spain and France in those days doesn't quite fit the prophecies. And yet he says not a single word of these prophecies will fall empty. And we have faith in Hashem that everything's going to come about the way that he prophesied. So then he goes on to interpret them in a way that makes them somewhat more conceivable for people of his time and fits the words. But again, he wants to say that despite the fact that the prophecies seem to not fit our current reality, he says they're all going to come true. Just have faith and you'll see. So he does a similar thing with Persia. He says that Persia, in the context of these prophecies, is actually a reference to, he says, Turkey. Turkey. Now consider that in his time, Turkey was a major world power. So Turkey, being a major world power that not only was once the center of Christianity with the Byzantine Church in Constantinople, but then became taken over by the Muslims and became an empire that originally controlled the entire Middle East before World War I. Turkey, the whole Middle East was Turkey. I mean, like I'm doing family genealogy, so I have Sephardic relatives, and they came from Syria. And so if you go to Syria and you look at their documents, it says they came from Turkey. They didn't come from Turkey, they came from Syria. But these countries didn't exist. There was no Syria, there was no Jordan, it was all Turkey. Okay. So the Abarbanel wants to say that Persia is a reference to Turkey because, that's the present power that controls that area of the world, essentially. But you can almost see that now Persia is a much more relevant player in world politics than Turkey was in the time of Abarbanel, although Turkey is also coming way more back into play, especially if you consider what's happening with Donald Trump and the summit of Arabian and Muslim nations, Middle Eastern nations. And we could look, there's a lot of speculation going around that Trump is abandoning Israel. All the things we talked about in the early classes, Trump's so pro-Israel. How could it be? How could it come about that if America is Edom, that they would be an adversary of Israel? Everything is playing out. Okay, I'm not saying that Trump is abandoning Israel. There's a lot of interpretation, but it's subject to interpretation. The point is that it's very unclear. Anything can happen. Anything can happen. All the pieces are being set. But at that summit, you had Turkey, and Trump is making overtures to Turkey and Erdogan, and he's a great friend. He's such a great leader. The guy is a dictator. He's a fanatical dictator. He wants to wipe Israel off the planet, and he's propping up Syria. As Syria, which is right at the border with Israel, and Trump lifts all sanctions against Syria and says, "Here, we'll give you all kinds of financial and military support." So now Turkey's becoming a much more relevant player. Iran is obviously a very relevant player, although, okay. So
but you can never look at face value with how Trump works, because he's always got 10 steps ahead.
maybe, but
Hondo
I don't trust him.
like he did the Abraham Accords.
I want to be optimistic, and I want to say, yeah, he's figuring out a way to play both sides. He wants to bring everyone together. He's got to, play politics. I understand that, and I accept that, and I'm open-minded and optimistic that it's true.
I will help you.
What?
I will help you.
Okay. At the same time, I'm saying that there's different interpretations of his moves. No one really knows what he's doing, and I don't think we really know either. So time will tell. Time will tell. We have yet to see. I was listening back to my old class on Shir Hashirim, where it talks about there's a section that talks about looking out over Damascus. I don't know if anyone remembers this, that in the future, the land of Israel, actually says the city of Jerusalem, no less, will expand and expand until it touches Damascus. And you could look at that symbolically of, again, a reunification between, Israel and its enemies. But, now with the fall of Syria, and Israel is sort of occupying parts of Syria in order to protect their own borders, and also to protect the Druze communities there, and the Druze are asking them to come and annex. A lot of these things are playing out right in front of our eyes. So it's really quite astounding.
And you have to think, like, Syria fell almost overnight. It was like crazy.
Right, it was
crazy how fast it fell.
And that's the way these things are. Everything from the last class till this, so much has changed. There's a new pope, okay? Between the last class and this one, there's a new pope. And not only that, listen to this. The pope is American. How crazy is that? Here we're talking about Ovadyah. We're talking about Western nations. We're talking about Rome and Christianity. And even here, again, Abarbanel, he called it again, because and I was hiding the ball a little bit because a lot of the commentaries were talking about how these prophecies relate to Rome, specifically Rome, and I'm thinking Rome is also like a nothing burger today. It's really not relevant. So I wanted to relate it more to America, which is much more the big player in the Western world today. And then suddenly an American goes and becomes the Pope in Rome. And again, that the commentaries talk about these prophecies referring to Christianity. I'm like, okay, well, what does that have to do with anything? But here you have the Catholic Church. The head of the Catholic Church is now, which is in the Vatican, which is basically Rome for all intents and purposes, is an American. So America and Rome and Christianity all suddenly converged in the last couple of weeks, while Trump is playing nice with the Arabs, and there's speculation of a certain gulf growing between him and Israel. I don't know. Things are changing rapidly. We just don't know. But as I'm watching things happen, I'm like, it's pretty crazy. We talked about all of this. So even things that we're going to encounter, and the Abarbanel says that look like, how could this possibly come true? This prophecy doesn't look like it fits our present world map. He says, wait and see, wait and see. And I'm telling you, wait and see, wait and see. Some things pop out a little bit more, and some things we're going to have to wait a week. And maybe by next week, we'll see. Fine. I'm going to pause from looking at the live stream comments because I want to cover a little more ground. People who want to say something more urgently, come into the class. The link is above in the chat. Just scroll up. Okay, so back to the slides. Let's go to verse number 17, which reads as follows. Uvhar Tzion tiyeh eleta v'haya kodesh v'yareshu beis Yaakov eis morashehem, which means as follows. Uvhar Tzion tiyeh eleta, and in the Mount of Zion, or we translate upon the Mount of Zion, not in a mountain, on a mountain, will be Peleta, here a remnant. Peleta. We had the word Peleta before when I think when it was condemning Edom for what they had done. I'm going the wrong way. I'm going down. I need to be going up. When it was condemning Edom for what they had done to the Jews, what did we see? It said, okay, yeah. V'al ta'amod al haperek lahachrit et pilitav. Don't stand upon the perek, upon the junction, as we said, to cut down their palit, refugees, right? So here we have, there'll be a pileta, there'll be a remnant, if you will, upon the Mount of Zion, V'haya Kodesh, and it will be holy. Now the question is, what will be holy? The mountain will be holy, or the remnant will be holy? This is a matter of dispute between the commentaries. And it says, V'yareshu Beit Yaakov eit morashehem, and the house of Jacob shall inherit Morashehem. Now, there's a question what Morashehem means. You can see from the word Yareshu, which is based on the Shoresh Yarash, to inherit, that the word Morashehem has the same Shoresh. So it's something to do with inheritance. The question is Morashehem related to the word Morish, which is literally in Hebrew, the word Yarash means two things. It means to inherit, and it also means to disinherit. So when the Jews are commanded to come into the land of Israel and chase out its inhabitants, it uses the word yorash, that you will yorash your enemies. It doesn't mean you'll inherit your enemies. It means you'll disinherit them of the land. So the lehorish, this word morashehem, if it's related to the word morish, which is the causative form, to cause to inherit, it could also mean to cause to disinherit. So it could mean that the house of Jacob will inherit those who disinherited them, which could either mean they will disinherit those who disinherited them, meaning those who kicked the Jews out, the Jews are going to come back and kick them out. Or it means they'll inherit the land that those who kicked them out were presently occupying, okay? Or it could be related to the word morasha, and a morasha literally means a heritage. It's sometimes translated as an inheritance, but inheritance is a yerusha, and a heritage is a morasha. And what's the difference between the two? So the explanation that I learned on this was as follows. A yerusha, inheritance, means it's mine to do with as I please. I inherited it, now it's mine. I can do whatever I want with it. I can alter it, I can change it, I can destroy it, sell it. It's mine to do with as I please. But a morasha, which is a heritage, means I inherited it, but it's my responsibility to pass it to the next generation. There are two things that in the Torah are called morasha. Does anyone know what they are? That is a heritage, something we receive, and we have to pass it on intact to the next generation. Morasha. Two things are called this in the Torah. Anyone know what they are?
The Torah itself?
The Torah itself, Morasha Kehilat Yaakov, it is a heritage of the house of Jacob, good, of the congregation of Jacob. Good. What else?
The land?
The land of Israel is a Morasha. So, very good. So, here in this verse, they will inherit their Morasha, could mean they'll inherit the land. So the question is it talking about, it comes out to the same thing, whether it means that we'll sort of get back from our enemies what they took from us, or we'll inherit what's properly ours to inherit, which is the land. It's really ultimately the same thing. You see, I put some alternative translations here on the slide. Their heritages, those who dispossess them. Either way, it amounts to the same thing.
Could it also pertain to the land that Hashem promised to Abraham is way more extensive than the land now?
Oh, very good, very good. So, excellent. So, in the famous Brit Ben Habitarim, the covenant between the parts in Genesis 15, we have God promises to Abraham the land of 10 nations. Okay, and it lists 10 nations there. Now, when the Jewish people come out of Egypt, they are promised the land of 7 nations. What happened to the other 3? So, if you look in Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 5 abouts, okay, and look at Rashi's comments over there, you'll see that in the opening verses of chapter 2 in Deuteronomy, it talks about certain nations that were not allowed to antagonize, were not allowed to attack, were not allowed to take land from them. And it says because their land is an inheritance. God gave them the land as an inheritance. Who are these nations? The nations of Moab, Ammon, and Edom. Okay, those 3. Why is it an inheritance? Because they're all heirs of Abraham. Why are they all heirs of Abraham? They're heirs of Abraham because Moab and Ammon are the children of Lot. Lot was Abraham's nephew, who was his loyal sidekick through all of his journeys. And if you look at Rashi's commentary over there, he explains that before Abraham even had a son, Isaac, there was kind of an assumption that Lot was going to inherit him, and God even granted him the status of an heir because of his kindness to Abraham, that he was his loyalty to Abraham. So he gave to Lot's sons, Moab and Ben-Ami, who was the progenitor of Ammon, 2 lands as an inheritance. And to Esau, who's also from Abraham, as a grandchild, he also inherits the land of Edom. Okay, so these 3 lands. However, the commentaries tell us that that's only temporary. But in the Messianic era, Israel will inherit all 10 lands. And it's interesting that there are no more Edomites in that land. There are no more Moabites, and there are no more Ammonites. So now the sole heir of that land is Israel. So we will get those lands back. And in fact, we're going to see that in the book of Ovadyah coming forward. Okay, the next slide is the Targum, the Aramaic translation of verse 17, says, Uvetura de Tzion tehe meshezavta vihon kadishin. On the Mount of Zion will be a remnant, and they will be kadishin. Kadishin. Now, meshezavta, and also like we saw, Plata has the connotation of being survivors as well. Okay, keep that in mind, that the population of Israel at this time will be a population of refugees, of survivors from something. Today, we see that. Okay, we have the population in the land of Israel today are refugees from Europe and refugees from the Arab lands that expelled them, and Europe that attempted to exterminate them. Vihon Kadishin means, and they will be holy. So you see that the Aramaic translation clarified that when it says, and it will be holy, the it is the remnant, because it says, they will be holy. Okay. And then it says, V'yachsenun devet Yaakov nichsei amemaya, and the house of Jacob will inherit the nichsei, means the property of, the possessions of amemaya, the nations, the havo machsanin lahon, that had inherited them. So in other words, there were nations that took possession of the land, and we are going to get it back from the nations. Okay, here's just a dictionary definition of the root of yachsenun, to inherit, could mean to take possession, bequeath, right? Hoard, hold, different ways of understanding that targum. Fine.
Could
Now,
also the remnant, could it imply in a way the 10 lost tribes coming back?
maybe let's hold that thought.
Okay.
We're not going to rule it out yet. Okay, we're going to talk about the 10 tribes in verse 18. I'm not confident we're going to get there because we have a lot of ground to cover just on verse 17 alone. So here in the commentary of Radak, it says up here, he says, on Mount Zion there will be a remnant, even though many of the people of Israel would be destroyed in exile. Now Radak is writing in, 13th century. He's pretty early. Okay, there will yet remain a large remnant on Mount Zion from whence they were exiled. So he seems to be saying that, yeah, a lot of Jews are going to die in the exile, but some will remain in Israel. Now, does he mean just that will never have been exiled? Or even while the destruction is going on outside of Israel, there will somehow be a population in Israel that survives, although he doesn't identify how that population came there. Now, it's certainly true that there was always a Jewish presence in the land of Israel since the time of the exile. The majority of Jews were exiled, but a pleta, a remnant, always remained. And they could be refugees of the exile, of the original exile, if you will. That could also be a meaning. But we're going to talk more about it. Is it just referring to that, or is it referring to more people that would return to the land of Israel out of the ashes of the exile that would continue to live there? So here the Radak continues and he says, the house of Jacob will inherit their inheritances, that which they inherited originally, and will further inherit their neighbors. This was the comment of Bri, the land of Edom and Moab and the land of the Philistines, he adds in. It's interesting that he doesn't say Ammon, but he says the land of the Philistines will be it's just an interesting Pelishtim. That's where the name Palestine comes from. And the land of the Philistines, believe it or not, is basically Gaza.
Right.
So that's where the Philistines, they were a coastal kingdom. So here the Radak is writing that these will be among the lands. By the way, the land of Edom, guess what? We already have it. The southernmost part of the land of Israel, like where Eilat is, the Gulf of Aqaba, that's where Edom was. We already did this. Okay, but Moab is on the eastern side of the Jordan, so that's where Jordan is presently. Okay, that we haven't inherited yet, and we still have some troublemakers on the coast in the land of the Philistines giving us trouble. But the prophet is telling us we will inherit those lands. By the way, that's happening right now as we speak. Israel is invading and occupying Gaza, and the plan is to relocate its population. Okay. Let's go further. Okay, there's just who's the holy ones. It's either the people or the mountain. What is the Morashehem, the inheritance? It's either the land, or it means we'll disinherit those who disinherited us. It really amounts to the same thing, right? Mount Zion, there'll be a remnant. Okay, here's what the Malbim says. Listen to this. Now, Malbim wrote in the 1800s. Okay. He says, there shall be a remnant upon Mount Zion, and the dispersed of Israel will return there gradually. And what I didn't put in the English translation here is he puts in the parentheses here, as it's written, or he says, as I wrote in my commentary to Isaiah at the end of chapter 65. Now, this is not correct. It's in chapter 66. So this could be a printer's error. It's actually the beginning of 66. So I'm not sure what he means by the end of 65. It could just be the way that they had the numbers divided up was different than our present editions. Then again, yeah, I don't know. The chapters and verses get divided up differently in different editions. So maybe in his edition it was 65 and ours it's 66. On the verse B'terem tachil yalada, before she will have birth pangs, she will give birth. So I wanted to examine that, and that'll be the last thing we have time for. And verse 18 we'll have to wait for another time. So let's take a look at Isaiah 66 verse 7. It says, B'terem tachil yalada, b'terem yavo chevel, la behimlita zachar. Okay, before she will have birth pangs, b'terem tachil, before she will have birth pangs, yalada, she will have given birth. B'terem yavo chevela, before the pain comes to her, behimlita zachar, she will already have pushed out a baby boy. Okay, now what is that a reference to? Okay. Maybe I'll go ahead a little bit. Malbim says like this: before she will have birth pangs, she will have brought forth a male offspring. Before the final redemption, there will already be a resettling of the Holy Land. Okay? Before this, the Malbim is predicting that before the final redemption, there will already be a resettling of the Holy Land. This happened. Okay? Now, what's the next verse say? It says, I'm going the wrong way again. Verse 8 in chapter 66 of Isaiah. Mishama kazos mira'a ka'ele hayuchal eretz biyom echad im yivoled goy pa'am echos ki chala gam yoledot Zion es boneha, which means Mishama kazos, who has heard such a thing? Mira'a ka'ele, who has seen such things? Hayuchal eretz biyom echad. Now, literally, I wrote a literal translation. Will a land experience pangs in a single day? The Malbim says this means there will be a great pain. There will be great trouble. There will be great distress that will affect the entire world simultaneously. A great worldwide conflict. Now, is this talking about World War I, World War II? I don't know, but I can tell you this. Based on what it says next, I'm going to say not. But he says there'll be pangs there'll be pain that the whole world will experience in one. That's what it means. Yuchal eretz b'yom echad, eretz meaning the earth. In one day, he says, has there ever been such a thing that the whole earth experiences pain all at once? But he calls it hayuchal. This is the pain of a birth pain. And then he says, "In yivaled goy pa'am echas, will a nation be born all at once?" Which he says is going to happen. There's going to be this great pain throughout the world, and at the time of this great pain throughout the world, all the Jews will return to the land of Israel. So again, going back to verse 7, what does it say? It says that before she'll have birth pangs, she has given birth. That means before the redemption, which is going to come through pain. Sad to say. Before that occurs, there will already be a birth. Okay? So what is that birth? He says, before the redemption, already the children of Israel will return to the land. She's the mother and they are the children. So the return of the children to the land is a birth. There'll be a birth, but it'll be a partial birth, if you will. Some of the Jews will return, not all of the Jews, before this time of birth pangs. The birth pangs will come later. And then he says that there'll be this great pain felt throughout the world. It'll impact the Jews everywhere. The Jews will suffer everywhere in the world. And because of this suffering, they're all going to be forced, to a certain extent, to return to the land of Israel. And this will be the nation born at once. That finally the redemption will come with all the Jews returning to the land of Israel out of a state of pain and distress, which is compared to the birth pain, right? For Zion has experienced pangs also given birth to her children. So here it's interesting that in verse 8, the second birth is described as coming with pain. In verse 7, the birth, it says before the pain there's a birth. And the second time there's going to be this worldwide pain, and the nation's going to be born out of that pain. Though all the Jewish people will return. Verse 9. Ha'ani ashbir v'lo olid yomar Adonai im ani hamolid v'otzarti omar Elohayich. Means like this. Ha'ani ashbir v'lo olid. Shall I bring to the birthing stool and not cause to give birth? Ashbir, from the Hebrew word mashber. Mashber is the I saw it translated as the travailing chair, that this was the birthing stool. Sometimes this is where the woman would sit who's giving birth, and she would have her birth pangs. And it's from the word shever in Hebrew, which means to break. There's a breaking of the waters. There's a lot of pain. There's a breaking through of the child. So it has to do with breaking. This is the birthing stool. So Hani Ashbir, this is in the causative form. Will I cause the woman to come to the mashber, to the birthing stool, and not give birth, says Hashem? Meaning, you're going to experience this. Everything I'm telling you now is how the Malbim explains it, because he references his commentary. In Ovadyah, he says, when it says that there'll be a Plato, there'll be a remnant, there'll be refugees in the land of Israel at this time, and it'll be a small amount. He says that's the initial return of the Jewish people before the great pain. Okay. And so he says that you Jews are going to experience this pain, and you'd be like, pain, pain, pain. We don't want pain. We don't want pain. God says when a woman comes to the birthing stool, to the travailing chair, as it were, and is in pain, the pain brings about the birth. So if I'm causing you pain, Jewish people, don't think this is pain for the sake of pain. This is not pain for the sake of pain. This is pain for the sake of birth. He says, shall I bring to the birthing stool and not cause to give birth? Imani hamolid, if I am the one who causes birth, the atzarti, I will, atzar in Hebrew means to stop. I will stop it. Like here, I'm going to just make birth pangs with no birth. I'm going to bring the birth pangs and then stop the birth. Said your God? No, it's a sort of a rhetorical question. Of course not. The pain that will be experienced at this time will be the pain of birth. It will bring about the birth. So it's almost like Jews do not fear, do not despair, because the suffering, God forbid, that we're going to experience is going to be the suffering of birth, which will bring about the redemption. God says, I'm not going to make pain for nothing. The pain will bring the birth. You could be assured. Okay. So, okay, all these slides is really just what I told you based on the commentary of the Malbim, which I said more or less outside. Okay, and then comes verse 18. So this is a good place to pause. We'll save verse 18 for next time. Any questions or comments before we close out the class? I'll make a comment. My comment is that so here, this is why I think this didn't take place yet. This is not talking about World War I or World War II, because us Jews in America are still very comfortable. It's getting hot. The temperature is getting hot. We're kind of like a frog in the water. You know, everyone knows the parable, the frog in the pot of boiling water. The water gets hotter and hotter gradually. The frog doesn't move till he boils. I feel like I'm talking to myself a little bit. The Jews in America, we're kind of like trying to sit out the current wave of anti-Semitism, which is like worse than it's ever been in this country. And the temperature is getting hotter and hotter, and anti-Semitism is up by the hundreds of percent. Right. And we're like, it'll blow over. By the way, it's what they said in Germany also. And it'll never happen here. That's what they said there also. We and God forbid, but I'm saying we haven't yet experienced the pain in the United States of America the way it's been experienced in Europe, the way it's been experienced in the Arab world for Jews living in the Arab world. So that's one. Two is there hasn't been this simultaneous one day, and it may not be a literal day, but still a very quick succession of the Jews making a mass aliyah to Israel. It's still been gradual. So I think this is an event that's yet to come. It may not be far off. Nobody really knows, but I think this is something that we can yet, and what's being described in these verses we're seeing some of it has happened, some of it is happening, and some of it will yet happen. When will it happen? How will it happen? We don't quite know, but it seems to be on the horizon. Okay, any questions or comments before we end? Okay, I'm going to briefly look at the YouTube live stream comments because I didn't address them, many of the comments yet here. Okay, Golden God says, if Taman is Edom, there must be a reason that sometimes it uses the word Edom and sometimes Taman. Okay, I'm going to allow you to contemplate that. If you figure out a reason, let me know. The words for Edom change up all the time. You have Esau, it's sometimes called Esau, something called Seir, which was the mountain where Edom dwelled. It's sometimes called Edom, it's sometimes called Taman, it's sometimes called Botzra. There are many different cities in Tanakh that are, or individuals, people, offspring of Esau that are associated with Edom, and they seem to be used synonymously. I don't think it's an invalid point to say that there's some nuance between them. If you can discover what it is, I'll be grateful to know. Okay. Looking at other comments to see if there's any that I can address right now. Okay. Turkey did not exist before 1920, was Ottoman Empire. I don't know that Turkey didn't exist. It's not true. It's not true. The Ottoman Empire was the Ottoman Turks. I mean, the same way there's a turkey bird in the North America. It was named for the Turks, right? Because it was a wild bird, so they called it like the wild Turks, right? It was a turkey bird. We find the name Turkiya throughout our literature, our commentaries. There was definitely a country called Turkey. It may have been Togarma in the.
But Turkey was the head of the Ottoman Empire.
That's right. I'm saying it was the Ottoman Empire. I mean, it was the Ottoman Turks. The Ottomans were that was the dynasty that was before there was the Mamluks, but it was still Turkey. So I don't think you could say Turkey did not exist. It didn't exist in the current borders and government that it is today, but there was certainly Turkey. It ruled over the whole region. Yeah, Vatican recognized Palestine, not Israel, right? So the Catholics are very uncomfortable with Israel because it flies against their theology of replacement theology. These prophecies should not come true for Israel because the Catholic Church took over as the identity of Israel. So all the prophecies really should be talking about them, not the Jews. So the existence of the state of Israel is a serious challenge to Catholic theology, which is why they're so uncomfortable with Israel and have been very cold to Israel since its inception. And so we may yet see what relevance the Vatican will have towards Israel, especially now they have an American Pope, which puts a spotlight on it. We've been relating a lot of these prophecies to America, and now we have another connection. Okay. I'm reading the comments. I'm just trying to see if there's any that I could respond to.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'm just not clear. And maybe, Hashem knows, obviously. But do the 10 tribes come back before all the Jews come back to Eretz Israel? Or is that kind of one and the same?
Okay, I'll tell you my short answer is I don't know. I don't know that the prophecies about this are abundantly clear. Maimonides in general says the messianic prophecies are unclear in such a way that we cannot know their exact fulfillment until they happen. We will encounter the 10 tribes in the Book of Ovadyah. So let's wait till we get there and see what we can make of it. Okay, gotta go. Thank you all for joining. See you, God willing, next week. And
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yes, Koach.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Be well.